lot of different formulas you can use for Crossettes, and I kind of settled on a couple of them. A modified version of Winneke's number 39, and also a modified version of Winneke's number 6. They're both glitter type Crossettes, and when they spread out in the sky and when they pop, they kind of like pop into puffballs and they fill up the sky a little bit. Charcoal Crossettes on top of rocket headings, they work okay, but you'll notice much more of the fragmentation as each of the comets breaks, and it doesn't quite fill the sky with the effect when they split. So I've got some 39 mix here, which I can give you the formula if you're interested. It's a modification of Winneke's. I call it 39J. I've used this formula in quite a lot of things. And the reason it got to 39J is because when I started working with the 39 formula, every time I changed something, I'd put a little letter after it, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. And every time I do something different, I just label it different. And I got to this one here that I like. It's not the only formula in the world you can use, but it works pretty nice. It's 51% nitrate, 19% airflow charcoal, 12% antimony sulfide, 9% atomized aluminum. Kusanke used to carry it and he called it S10, but when I was looking in the Skylighters catalog last night, I believe it's similar to what he would call his number 9 aluminum. I've seen this formula done with a lot of different atomized aluminums, and it all seems to work pretty good, but I believe it's the 12 micron spherical atomized. You can try other aluminums. You can try flake aluminum. Sure, it'll all work nice. You just have to try it and see what works good for you. 5% barium carbonate, 4% dextrin. That adds up to 100%. If you want to add a little bit more twinkle to it, seeing these are shot at relatively close range, you'll see it. You can add an additional 2.5% or so, 2-3%, 60 mesh, 50-50 magnesium. And when I'm pumping, I mix up my boric acid and my water. Okay, this is what I use to dampen all my glitter mixes, which are nitrate formulas that also contain aluminum and stuff like that. I always put some boric acid in there. If you're cutting glitter and stuff like that, you could probably add the boric acid dry to the mix, but when you pump, I'm only pumping with 7% water. I like to know the boric acid is in there going to work for me right away, so I mix it in with the water and then just use the water, 7.5% of the way to my formula, with 7%, and mix that in, and the boric acid's already in with the water. And how I do it is I take 500 grams of water and 30 grams of boric acid and put it in a container, plastic container or a jar or something, shake it up. Not all of the boric acid will go into suspension in the water. If you heat the water up a little bit, you'll see no boric acid in there. You let it cool down, some crystals will come out or whatever, but that's the solution I've always used. If there's some settling of the stuff on the bottom before I use it, I just shake it up and then weigh out my water and then dump it into the mix and mix it up that way. And I have some 39 mix right here. And I have already weighed out some. This is a little bit more than 7% in this instance for this demonstration here, but I found 7% is more than enough water. You can get I've gone as low as 6%. But it's more than enough to do the job, and when you're pumping, you just don't need any more in this formula. Other formulas I use, my charcoal formulas and stuff, I'll go 10% water, and I'll use straight water. There's no need to put boric acid in that. When I'm mixing, I normally do 5-gallon pails of the stuff, but for right here, I'll just bag mill it, put it in the bag, and work the stuff around and do the best we can to break up the lumps. When I'm doing larger quantities of any type of mix that I'm going to pump, whether it's any type of mix, I'll mix it up the best you can in the bucket, and you mix and you mix and you mix, and you think everything is mixed in really great, but then you take and you screen them stuff through maybe an 8-mesh or a 6-mesh screen, and you'll be surprised the globs of water that get broken up and redispersed throughout the mix. And when you're done screening it, it comes out a nice, fluffy, well-integrated mixture of chemicals, and it's really nice to work with. I do not have my screen for doing this. Some of the tooling I come up with for making these is 2 different size crossettes I make. These 1 3/8" diameter, these are the ones I use in my 8-inch multi-break crossette shells. And this size here is nice for 5-inch. You can use this size for 4, 5, and 6-inch shells. They fit a nice dividable number, a divisible number inside the ring, inside the shell casing when you're setting them up. But this is also the size I use on my Crossette rockets. I designed the pump so that I can change tips, different size, different type cavities if I want, or if I'm just pumping out comets or something like that. You can you put this in to make just a regular, so you can use the same handle or plunger, and you can use the same sleeve for doing different. In this particular design, you can control the burning of the burn time of the Crossette. There's a number of ways you can do it. And they're designed to light on one end. You can see the thing is pasted all over. And basically you can change the length of the star. You can change the length the pin sticks out of the tip. Well, the whole name of the game is to change this distance in here, which is the distance from when it takes fire to when it passes to the cavity in which the thermalite and flash powder is in. And that you experiment. I've run distances in here anywhere from 1/4 of an inch up to over 700 thousandths, depending on what I'm doing, 7/10 of an inch, depending on what I'm doing. On rocket crosshead headings, I tend to run them short because you don't want the crossheads coming down, down, down. You want to get them out there and just, pop them, because the rockets aren't going all that high as compared to an aerial shell. Another unique feature about the way this thing works is, again, by varying the pin distance and varying the overall length. You notice that on these things I don't have any pin or anything sticking out here, which is normally where you'd load against and then rotate it a little bit and then press the thing. The way I do it is a little bit different, because I change things all the time depending on what I'm doing. I have a series of different gauge blocks or size blocks or whatever to hold this like so. So when I'm pushing into the comp, depending on how hard you're pushing, depending on the comp, depending on a lot of things, you vary this distance so that after you press it, and I press these things pneumatically, I've got a pneumatic press, but when you press them, you like to get them so that maybe they're about 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch over what the finished length of your star is going to be, and then I trim them afterwards to the exact length, and I'll show you how that's done too. But again, I don't have my press here with me. I never hit things. Everything I do is done with an air press. But again, not having that here, I'm going to have to resort to a mallet. But you'll get the idea of how the star is formed, and we'll go from there.
How much pressure do you use in your pneumatic press?
Again, it depends. The cylinder's it's a 3 3/4 inch diameter cylinder, and I normally run about 100 pounds on it. Large 3-inch comets and stuff, I got a 6-inch piston. I run 100, 120 pounds on it. Spolettes, it all depends on what I'm doing. But rockets, I crank it up 120 pounds or so on a 3 3/4 inch piston. I'm getting about, it's written down in here approximately what I get for pressure when I pressure my rocket engines, but well, let me see. I'm putting about approximately 1,200 pounds down on this when I press these things. You can go less, but I've got the ability to get the pressure up there and stuff, so I found I haven't had too many problems with my motors exploding, and I'm convinced that a lot of it has to do with you know, the fact that you consolidate the comp pretty good. So this has been all screened. And normally I've got a nice bucket of the stuff, but oh, let me see what looks about right, huh? That's a bit long. Oh, let's try this one and see how it works. Normally, again, you have a larger bucket. It's only a couple of shots down. Depending on how hard you press, how tired you are, or whatever, you got to do it about the same each time. When you get going on these things and you got your system going, you got your hands working in the right place, well, they don't fly out super quick, but you can press out some crossettes in a reasonable amount of time. I put way too much comp in there. See, again, with my press, this would go right down. Assuming that's pressed, my rocket ones, I think I was making those about 1 5/8 long. So let me see what else we got here.
That space is very 16.
It depends on what I'm doing. All right, 1/600. Some comps really lock in pretty hard, and I've made up a overhead deal with it's a little small base that I clamp to the bench. It's got some uprights coming down. It's got a lever arm over here like this, so that I'd slide this in, depending on, like my charcoal comp, that locks in pretty hard. And you put it in, and you got this lever arm. You pull down the lever arm and establish a uniform overall length. Okay? Now again, normally when that's charged, it'd only be 1/8 to 1/16 sticking out over the top. And you get a feel how much to put in, what size spacer. You get the feel. This is way too much, but this is only a demonstration. And I made up this trimmer with some carbide cutters in there. It's similar to, I guess, would probably be like a pepper mill or something. Instead of slicing this off with a razor blade or a knife or whatever, and getting lumps back in your mix, this deal here slides over. And usually give it a couple of twists, but right now we got more. We got a lot more comp than I normally have. And the stuff comes off nice and powdery, although, wouldn't you know, for this demonstration it is not. It comes off nice and powdery. Give it a twist, and then again I go back in my press, pop the thing off. And if you guys give this any type of squeeze, it's going to break real easily. So, all right, once the things are pressed out and they're dried, I found the best way I could get these crossettes to work was by I tried all different types of cavities and designs and stuff like that. I tried just dumping in the flash powder. I tried different types of flash powder. I got consistent inconsistency until I started you use medium or fast thermalite. And I run it from right smack inside that hole right up to the back of the thing. That seems to get the flash powder working. I've had some pretty good results using thermalite. I've heard other fellas just dump the flash powder in and have no problems at all. I had problems, so I went to the thermalite and again tried different diameter cavities, different length cavities, and this is the deal here that ended up working pretty good. So you take I got a thermalite cutter over here I made up. Basically it's like a small guillotine. This stuff is getting scarce, but I heard it's going to be made again. I heard it's not going to be made again. I've heard it's going to be made again. I don't know. So it's getting scarce. I have a method of gauging the distance from the bottom of the hole to the back of the cavity, and I set that distance with the stop. But the bottom line between this is it's two holes that line up, and then when you go like this, it shears it and gives you a nice clean end. You still get the fuzz, but the wires and stuff like that cut off nice and clean, and it makes it easy for inserting down inside the cavity. I have a little wooden dowel, which I don't know if I brought with me, but the bottom line is I put this into a little wooden dowel with a hole in the end of it, which is most likely at home. And it's just a tool that holds the thing and allows you to push the thermalite all the way down into the cavity. It's basically, again, a dowel with a hole in the end of it that holds the thermalite.
So your thermalite's just friction bit in the hole?
Excuse me?
Your thermalite's just a light friction?
Yes. And again, it depends on how much fuzz you got on the end, and depends if the wires spread out a little teeny bit or whatever. But you can get the stuff in there. It's a nice fit. It's not in there loose. Made up a series of measures to try different amounts of different amount of powder or whatever the heck it is that you dump down inside the cavity. And then to hold it in while you're rolling it up and pasting it, I also made up another punch, and I punch out some discs that clip right into the cavity there and holds everything in place so that when you're rolling it up, and a side benefit of that is the flash powder doesn't really flow that well. It doesn't flow like table salt or anything like that. It tends to want to sit on top when you get a whole tray of these things. But this little section in here where that disc goes, it forms a nice little place for the powder to rest on. And you take the tray and you kind of like tap things, and then it flows into the cavity. You put the little discs on the back and get your pasted paper and you roll them up. And 2 turns of 30 is what I found works good in shells. I found it works good in the Crossette headings. Now, I made these headings, I don't know when I started making them. It was a while back. And once I got them dialed in, I mean, I was shooting up rockets and they're coming off in 4s and things are working great and stuff like that. And then I started having some problems. 3-wood light, 2-wood light. So what's going on here? And I mean, I was going nuts. I started experimenting with the, which we will get into, the shot that goes down in the middle of, there's a shot I'll show you how I make the shot that goes down the middle. I started experimenting with the type of flash that I was putting in the shot, and I was again getting consistent inconsistency, and I said, hey, this is crazy. I'm doing something here that I wasn't doing in the past. Stop. And I reevaluated what was going on. And I have 2 different methods of adhering the prime onto crossettes. One method is using nitrocellulose black powder paste, thinned out with either acetone or lacquer thinner, depending on how fast you want the drying time. But pasting a slurry on there and then pushing this into some, in this case here, it's some commercial black powder, or I used to granulate some black powder. You want a rough surface on the thing that catches fire real easy. I tried experimenting with the type of powder I was putting on there, and I was still getting crazy results. And I went back to the other type of slurry that I use is a meal D, nitrate, dextrin, silicone prime that I was using. And the problems that turned out with my consistent inconsistency was I went back to the original nitrocellulose prime that I was using to hold these in. Apparently the silicone prime was working great in my shells. I was having no problems with anything malfunctioning in my shells, but apparently for some particular reason the silicone prime adhesive that's used to hold the black powder on in the rocket head, your Crossette rocket headings, just wasn't working right. And when I went and mixed up myself another batch of nitrocellulose, started exactly what I've been doing, but with a fresh batch, things started working well again. So the method of adhering the prime onto these things, I have found to be critical. And it's a mixture of, I ball mill some 75, 15, 10. I ball mill it down till it's dust. Hand mixed won't work quite as well. I ball it, mill it down till it's dust. And I've got some nitrocellulose lacquer that's really it's thick. The way I made this stuff here, I took some shotgun reloading powder, because at the time I didn't have access to the regular nitrocellulose, but I took DuPont High Score 700X and dissolved that down in acetone until it's real thick. I mean, it's as thick as honey. And 1 weight of that to 6 weights of the ball milled black powder. It's really fine. It's like talcum powder dust. And then thin that out to suit till it's a paintable consistency. You have to work with it. Thin it out to suit with a combination of either acetone or a lacquer thinner, or a lacquer thinner and acetone, till you get a nice, real creamy, spreadable, paintable that you can paint on the thing and into your prime. And it holds on pretty good, and they've been lighting pretty good. And I think I've resolved the problem that I never had in the past until I changed something. So now we've got the stars, they're made, and they're primed, pasted, and they're primed. So the way I make the heading, okay, let me see. These are all the same. And wouldn't you know, I don't have my masking tape, and I got this. I usually use 3/4 inch masking tape. But I made up this little fixture here, this little jig. Because you gotta be able to hold these things in a group of 4, and you can't really do it too well like this. So I made up this little fixture. It's basically held with a little rubber band. You can see how that works. Just holds them together. Well, you can use 1 inch, 3/4. See, the 1 inch is a little bit tall. I usually use 3/4. It's probably, yeah, I'll take it. Thank you. You can stretch the masking tape a little bit. Now, in this last one, here's where you can really stretch it and you pull it. And that's like so. Now you got something you can work with. /16 inch cardboard with a hole punched in the middle of it. I cut these things out in the paper cutter, and I have a little thing that cut it with a pair of scissors. Each time I do a bunch of these things, I say I'm going to make up a punch and die to do it, but then I ended up cutting with the scissor and never did make the punch and die to do it. This is gum tape. See if this one's already cut. Oops. Just like with anything else in fireworks, you got to get a feel for what's going on. It also includes how much you dampen the gum tape. Too much and the stuff slides all over the place. Not enough and it doesn't stick down real good. But we'll see what we can do here. Sometimes a little bit of soap in the water, I'll tell you, just makes the gum tape work a little bit better, but see how well I get this. I usually do up about 4 or 5 of these and let it sit for a second. Softens the dextrin a little bit more, but take your scissors and cut the edges. Now when that dries up, depending, sometimes I pull it a little bit tighter or whatever the heck, but then you get them looking nice, but when it's dried up. So you get the idea of how I hold the thing onto the disc. You're masking tape to hold the thing together so you can work with it. Then some gum tape. Nothing special. Now for the shots, I take some 1-inch wide gum tape. And I make myself up a little tool here. It's out of some stainless. I honestly thought I had a piece of that with me, but I guess I left it at home or something like that. But I think it's maybe a strip about this long. 1-inch wide gum tape.
7 inches.
Yeah, about that. I don't remember exactly what I did. Moisten it again with a sponge. You get the feel, get the dextrin so it's just right. Not wet enough and it will stick to this. Too wet and it just makes a mess and slides off too easy. You just have to do some until you get the feel. But you roll the stuff up on here and then this strips it off so that you get yourself a nice tube.
What diameter is that? 3/8?
It's a 3/8, yeah. .3/8 ID. And what's that wall? That wall's about what, 45 thousandths or something like that? She'll drop in. Right. See, it just so she fits in. Punch out some little discs. Again, I made up the tool. Simple little thing. It's like a hollow drill. Just a piece of 01 tool steel, flame hardened on the end. Get yourself some nice cardboard, some nice craft or something like that. Put it in the drill press on a block of wood. And you just slow speed, just with the quill. Punches out some nice little round discs. I suppose if you're going to have thousands and thousands and thousands of these things made, paper tube manufacturers do all this stuff for you. But again, not doing thousands and thousands of them. You got to make your own tubes, make your own discs. You know, maybe you'd have a different way in which you'd make the little shot. It would all depend on what you have to work with. Again, this is how I do it. Push the disc in the end, super glue it in place. You learn how to use super glue. We've been working with model airplanes for a while. There are all kinds of different super glues out there. You learn how to use them, you learn what you can do with them, you learn what you can't do with them. There are gap filling, non-gap filling. Again, it's knowing your materials you're working with and learning how to use those materials properly. Super glue a disc in the end. I got a little piece of 3/8 plastic. Put it in, I got a lathe. Put this in the spindle, in the collet and the spindle of the lathe. You slide these things on and just drill a hole through the thing. A hole that's snug enough to hold the thermalite. In this case, it's about a 16th hole. And that's the little shot with the disc, the hole in it. Cut a piece of thermalite. I used to cut the thermalite long enough so that it would go from the back of this disc all the way through and stick out the heading long enough so that it would just touch the powder that's up inside. When you drill back on your rockets, which we'll talk about later, that would just touch the powder drilled back. But now that thermalite's getting a little bit scarcer and I haven't got a new supply of this stuff, I make sure that I drill this hole just a little teeny bit smaller, enough so instead of the thermalite going all the way through to the back disc, the reason being is you wouldn't want it to change its location. There's nothing to do with ignition. It has to do with holding it in place so that this will stay down inside the rocket, on top of the motor. But I make the hole a little bit smaller now and don't cut the thermalite quite as long, and if I can save 3/8 of an inch or 4, you know, each time I use it, it's all the more I'm saving. Put your flash in here. In this case, I use 731. I'm sure, I know you can use different flash powders because I've used them when I tried slowing and toning the flash down when I wasn't getting good ignition. Putting a lot of barium nitrate in it, changing the aluminums and stuff like that. That wasn't what my ignition problem was. My ignition problem was the method I was holding the prime on with. So I went back to my 731. And I put in... Sure.
Do you fill that up or like half full, 731?
Well, so that's the next thing I was going to talk about. I have scoops and stuff like that, which I designed to put the flash powder into this thing. And the scoop that I use, it's a little scoop I made up, 300 thousandths ID, 300 thousandths long. It's about 5/16 by 5/16. I tried that, and here it is. I tried those dimensions. It works out pretty good. That's the amount of flash that I use to charge the Crossettes. I made up another scoop, 2 times this.
2 times the dimensions? Or
Yeah, 2 times the volume. 2 times the volume. And that's what I happen to use to charge these things. In direct answer to your question, yeah, it about fills it up, but it's 2 of these scoops. Works fine. Put your disc in on top and super glue that in place. And then it's got a pretty good pop to it. I wouldn't want it going off in your workshop. But that's the shot that goes down inside here. Pull it through. Now you want to make sure the shot stays in there. And the best way I found to do that, there's different ways you can do it. Take a piece of gum tape. Just a square piece of your 1.5 inches. You moisten it up. All right, there it is. And let me see. Here we go. I lay it across like so. If you lay it this way here, you can see how that's starting in. Again, this isn't critical. I just found if you lay it this way, there's more folds that fold to contact the inside of it just holds in a little bit better. And that's it. Nothing special. I don't bother to pleat it out. I just make sure the dextrin on the paper is wet properly, and just push it in. And when that's dry, sure, you can knock the thing out, but it's not going to move in normal handling, and it's certainly not going to move when you're assembling the rocket or anything like that. It's holding the shot in place. And then to finish off the top of the thing, I put things down at home in front of me, and I'd be damned if I can see them. And then the cat jumps up on the bench too, and then she really screws up my mind, and I lose things like you wouldn't believe. When you're doing a whole bunch of these things, you get the feel for just how wet to make this. I'm trying to be too pretty here. This one's too wet, the other was a little bit too dry. Well, you guys get the idea. Again, when you're in a different environment, you don't have a bunch of people looking at you, it's a hell of a lot easier. Now when that dries, believe it or not, even if you pull a little bit tight like that, when that dries, it does tighten up a little bit. Not that it has to, but it does tighten up, and that's how I put the things together. And finished, again, I passed these around before. You can see how nice it tightened up, really nice, looks presentable. That's how I make the headings for the Crossette rockets. Now, if you want to talk about other headings, you want to talk about motor construction, you have any questions about this, please ask.
You ever made Crossette headings with more than 4, 5, 6?
No, I haven't done that, and the simple reason is because then the hole in the middle will get a little bit bigger and stuff. When they're 4, you got that nice hole down the center, holds the shot in nice. I'm sure you could go larger, but this works nice on the rockets, and maybe some of you fellas, I think I shot one Crossette rocket last night, and on Monday night we were shooting a bunch of them. I haven't heard too many complaints about them.
It's going to be the other part, but how do you attach it to the top of the motor binding to hold it to the top of your motor?
Hot melt. Any other questions on these?
Tom, what's the average drag time for the Crossette?
I usually have them on a tray and have a fan blowing on them, and 7% moisture and stuff, I'm sure in about a week or so. I've heard people say you got to leave them for months and this, that, and the other thing, but you make your Crossettes and go do something else, let them sit for a week or two. You know, if you really, I've seen where you take the same amount of stars, you put them on your gram scale and you weigh them one day, and the next day they weigh a little bit less, and the next day maybe they weigh a little bit less. You wait a few more days, they weigh a little bit more. Maybe the atmosphere is a little bit more damper and it's picking up. So when it gets to that point, a good week with a fan blowing on them shouldn't have any problems.
About 4F on the front.
That's what this is, although I have used granulated homemade powder and had no problems getting it to work. You could probably use 3FG. You could use what, you know, I haven't found so much the granulations to being the problem. It was the adhesive holding the granulations on. That's what the problem was. This is 4F because I happened to have it when I was doing it. Any other questions?
What did you say?
Yeah, what was that?
The prime?
Yes.
4FA.
Okay, the adhesive you said.
Oh, it was a mixture of ball milled black powder and nitrocellulose. And that's the adhesive. I found that these motors here, which are, I think your normal 3/4 pound, 3/4 inch bore, excuse me, 1 pound, 3/4 inch bore motor, I think the tube is normally 7.5 inches. The tubes I got are 8 inches. And that little half-inch does make a difference in the amount of comp you can put in there, and it does make a difference in how much you can lift for it. Not a tremendous amount of difference, but it does make a difference. And I found with the tubes I'm using and the comp that I'm using inside the motors that well, this one here is marked 245 grams. 200 grams is really safe. You can get 200 grams up without a problem. I was lifting 245, 250 grams, and they go up. They don't go out of sight, but they go up high enough to do what you want to do. But I wouldn't start making headings in the 300 gram range. So when you're building headings for these type rockets, you got to be conscious of weight. I use either 2.5 inch inside diameter, or if you're lucky and you can get 3-inch discs, I use 3-inch inside diameter cans. Turn them up, roll them up out of 4 turns of 70-pound craft. It's one more turn than they conventionally say, you know, in the 3-inch they'd normally say 3 turns of 70 or something. I use 4 turns. It makes for a slightly stronger shell casing. I'm not pasting the outside of it because you don't need to. So it's 4 turns of 70 is what I roll up my... The only thing I use to break these things, I roll up a 1-turn, 30-pound craft paper. I guess you might want to call it a bag. 7/16 in diameter. You roll up one out of 1/2 inch and you put a 1/2 inch diameter. It's to hold the burst charge right smack in the middle of the thing, because there isn't much burst that goes in these. I have found that 7/16 diameter, and you can get brass tubing down the hobby shop or something like that, and all kinds of different diameters. You roll up 1 turn of 30 on it, and you make yourself up pieces about so long. You cut them off as you need them. Slip it back on your piece of brass. Have a little bit sticking past the end of the brass tubing so that you can like roll it in your hand and form like a little pleat around the end of the thing. A little bit of white glue on that. You drop it over your Thermalite pacifier. You can see I use Thermalite for the pacifier, and I roll Thermalite up into some loose leaf paper or something like that, a strip 3/4 inches wide. It allows you something to string around. You fellas follow what I'm doing? Super glue that in place so the Thermalite's sticking up inside just a little bit, just enough to get into your break charge. You glue your paper tube down in the middle of it. Fill in with your stars. I don't put anything in between the stars. You don't have to do that. The stars for small headings like this are cut pretty small, and they pack relatively well. 3 or 4 FA down the central core. Works great. What I do for the discs, again, you want to keep weight to a minimum. I use your standard 1/8 inch disc down the bottom when I pleat this over. I have in my press, that's how I press these pleats down in my 6-inch air cylinder press. It just makes a nice little cup.
There's no liner in here over these things.
No.
Just 4 turns of that craft.
4 turns of craft paper.
This is on top of the pleat.
Yes.
No liner.
Nope. Nope. What I do to the craft paper beforehand is I will take it and lay it on my table. And I'll know 1 turn, how long 1 turn is on the strip of craft paper that I'm going to make up the casing out of. That section I do not paste, and then I paste the rest of it, maybe a 1/2 inch band of white glue or something like that down the rest of it and across the end, so that when I'm rolling it up, my first turn is dry, but as I'm rolling it up on my former, the other 3 turns have got your white glue on it. Across the end where I went down this way here, that's the seam this way.
White glue, not PK?
No, white glue, Elmer's glue. Take it and cut it in a whole bunch of little segments with a pair of scissors or snips or whatever. Cut it in a whole bunch of segments. So now you've got all these little fingers sticking up here. Then I take my Elmer's glue on my brush, and then I brush, remember now, that first turn was dry. That's so I could slip the disc in there. Over the end of the former, slip the disc down, cut all your little pleats. Then take not too much white glue, just enough to dampen the thing. Spin it like this. They all go in like a cone. Take it over my press, and I press it. You know, into 3,000 pounds or whatever it is. I go and I roll up my next one. Well, that one's pressing, and when it only takes a minute or so, when it's done, you have a really nice looking can. Nice square end to it. It just looks right. Make a whole bunch of those. Either 2.5 or 3 inches inside diameter, depending. Put your thermalite pacifier in there. Again, wrapped up in loose leaf paper so that you got something to work around, something to glue to. Central bag. Fill in your stars, comets, reports, whatever you want to put in there.
Paper wrap on dry wrap?
Yeah, pretty much so. Maybe the last turn, just a little bit of white glue or something, just so that it doesn't unroll when you, because again, you make up a bunch of them. The bottom disc is an 1/8 inch disc. I take the same 1/8 inch discs, throw them in a bucket of water. Let them sit there for a while. You'll find the craft ones won't, but your chipboard ones will. They'll separate into 2 discs. 2 16th inch thick discs. Well, obviously you have let those things dry. 16th inch disc down. You know, do your pleats again. Fold it over, another disc on the top, and then you go string it. And that makes for... Now, did I pass any of these around before?
Take a while to get the tactical stars to tighten up so that glass disc sits nice and flat.
Well, over the stars on the last one, maybe you'll take some real coarse pulveron, which is handmade black powder, real coarse stuff. Maybe over that one, depending, you'll level off the top. But do I put pulveron, you know, some stars and pulveron? No way, not at all.
There are 2 discs on this end, one inside,
Yeah.
sleeve, and then another one.
Yeah, and I take the 1/8 inch disc, like I said, throw it in a bucket of water. They'll separate, and it saves on a disc, although that's not a problem unless you really have a hard time getting discs, but it also saves a little bit of weight, and you don't need any more. There was another question. They're 37 inches, there was no magical formula to determine the length with 37 inches. It's just that the wood I happen to have in the long plank allowed me to make them 37 inches long. And when I first tried making sticks and putting 37 inch long sticks on there, it worked. So I'm sure if you had 3-foot sticks, it's not going to hurt. If you had them longer, it's not going to hurt. It's just that it works. Again, the headings are held on with hot melt glue. On these type of deals where you've got a bunch of strings and stuff going across, I do put some hot melt glue in this area here because the fire, as it blows through your choke, lights the thermalite. Again, this would be pulled out just so you can see. You can still pull this and move it. I'm sure you fellas get the picture as to what's happening there. Thermalite's touching the powder. But there is a little fire up in here which can burn through the string. So I just make sure I put a little bit of hot melt in around this area here, just to kind of like flame proof it. And then glue the thing on. And a nice fillet here.
That spiking string doesn't use it.
Flax twine, I don't recall whether this is Belgian or Italian, but it's flax twine. I'm sure anything that's relatively strong will work just fine. And that's how I make my headings. Again, I make up all my own tooling and stuff like that, and nothing fancy about the spindle or anything like that. I used to have the thing a little bit longer. Give you a little bit more comp in there. You can see where the spindle ends in relation to the tube. Used to have a little teeny bit longer to get a little bit more comp in there, therefore the clay plug at the end was a little teeny bit thinner. And I'd pop a few plugs. So I cut a quarter inch off the thing. It allows me to put a little bit more clay in there. I haven't been popping any end plugs since then. It's slightly longer than your conventional tooling because these tubes are slightly longer than a conventional tube. But it's what I have a bunch of, and they work. This is the mix. You can get an idea of what rocket mix looks like. It doesn't look totally black. It looks more like salt and pepper. Here's the clay that I use. Again, nothing scientific about it. I used to have all kinds of different bentonite clay. Pail of this and a pail of that and a pail of the other thing, different mesh sizes and stuff like that. It gets to be crazy. I got to a point where I said, hey, look, stop. I just dumped it all together and mixed it up. And it works just fine. You know, you can overkill, you can over-engineer this stuff, and you can go crazy. I used to have different nitrates for this, and different potassium nitrate for that, and different potassium nitrate for this. All craziness. Get back to basics. Don't make it too complicated.
Granulated?
Yeah.
Screen wet?
Excuse me?
Just pass it through a screen wet?
Yeah.
Do you screen mix or do you ball mill anything?
Oh no, I don't ball mill any of it. Why add a process that you don't need? Why add a process that you do not need?
You got some pretty high-energy rockets that are here. The motor's really smooth. I know it's good compressing, but I didn't know if you did anything special with it.
No, when I started making rocket motors and stuff like that, I wanted to keep it as simple as possible, and I figured there's one more variable if you start ball milling and stuff. Well, let's see what you can do without making it complicated. The formula I got for the rockets, I got out of I think it was Chemical Literature's publication on rockets or something like that. I really don't remember. Everything I do by weight except for, well, when I mix my clay and grog, I do that by volume. You know, 2 scoops of clay and a scoop of grog. I do that for my nozzles and chokes or whatever the heck. But everything else is by weight. What you normally do is by weight. With that formula. Ray likes to use a formula that's a little bit different. And he's 60% nitrate, 60, what does he use? 631, I believe, is what Ray uses. 60% nitrate, 30% 80 mesh, and 10% sulfur. And I would never have believed that a rocket formula could be that critical to a few percent change. But we made up some, now bear in mind guys, this is the same chemicals, the same day, the same tubes, the same press, the exact same everything you could do to be the same. And one was this formula here, and one was the 60, 30, 10. Pressed them up, put them on a stick, went down the place where we test. Believe it or not, those other two at the harder mix, in my tooling and everything, they blew up. These went like a charm. So, again, this is not cast in stone. I have found out that this formula works well for me. It is not cast in stone, but I did some comparison tests side by side, and again, never would have thought it would have been that sensitive to a few percent change. I mean, what the hell's a few percent? It made a difference. Excuse, please? It's 80 mesh. Whatever you get in the 50 or 100 pound bags or whatever, it's 80 mesh. I've used different charcoals, I've used different nitrates, and I've used different sulfurs, and with this formula here, I haven't had that much of a problem. Like having to redial things, it always seems to work. But normally, when I try and get my chemicals, I try and get enough so that if you do have a problem and you do have to redial, it's redialed in, not like to 5 pounds, but like to a few bags of stuff, so that you don't have to go through that craziness again. Again, all my stuff is pressed. I don't hit anything with a hammer. Excuse me? I press everything. I mean, nozzles aren't going to blow up, but it's a heck of a lot easier and more uniformity to press the thing. In fact, I can pass around. Here's a finished motor. This is ready to go. It's all drilled out in the top, and here's one that was up in a test and stuff, and you can get a look at the choke, although it looks kind of ratty in there. If you take and cross-section this, you run this down your table saw and you cross-section it and pop the thing open real carefully, you'll see that that choke, even though it looks ratty, stays in pretty good shape. So here's an unburnt and a burnt. You pass them around together. I sleeve what I'm doing because I am putting a fair amount of pressure on it. You can swell the tubing. I have tools for doing that too. Another nice advantage of sleeving the tubing is if you want to get your clay right to the end of the thing. I mean, if you decide that's how you want it, so you can get the maximum amount of mix in the thing. When you start filling in the last few pressings of powder and then the clay, it's like over the end of the tube. So you have to extend the tube a certain way. And I don't know if any of you guys are into black powder or anything like black powder shooting. I made up a little extension that just drops in the top. Now you got a place for the clay to go as it's being pushed down, and you can get the thing pretty near right up to the end. But that's how I do it, is I just extend the tube out. There's nothing really scientific or magic about doing this. It's just that put in your scoop of clay and grog mix, seat it down, go over the press, you press it, tap out the extra, and then proceed to charge with your black powder mix, switching the rammers at a predetermined. You get a feel for how many pressings you get on each rammer and stuff like that. You get an eyeball as to how far it's coming up, and you know when to change from one with a larger hole to a smaller hole on down the line. Okay. Last time I was doing it, I knew someone was going to ask that question, so I did a whole bunch of motors, and I kept track of what I was doing. And including the clay and including the choke, excuse me, the plug. 16 to 17 pressings to do a motor is how I do it. I'd much rather press a whole bunch of small ones. You try and press a few of them, you don't get the compaction, and then you will have motors blow up. So it's 16 to 17 total pressings. About 65 grams of mix into each motor. There's about 52 or so to the top of the spindle. And this is where I change, the top of the spindle is where I change comp. And I'll tell you why I do it. Again, guys, you don't want to start, I press the regular mix up to the top of the spindle. And I've taken the 39 mix and I moisten it and I granulate it. And I press that from the top on up. In 2 large or 3 smaller pressings. And what I have found with the 39 mix, it leaves a nice twinkling, a little bit of a twinkling tail as it's going up. It's a little bit different than the charcoal tail. It's not anything really great. It's not like a super glitter tail. There's a way I can put glitter tails on these. That's a whole nother story. But what it does do is if you ever taken and you press this mix up top, it's in there pretty solid, but yet you can take your pinky and you can scrape it out reasonably easy. When you granulate this stuff and press it in there, it locks in solid. So not only do I have the clay choke The clay plug up top pressed in pretty solid. Some of this delay is actually pressed in pretty solid too, so I'm sure that's helping at least to a point during the initial thrust where you've got all the power, the pressure build up inside. I am sure that this to a degree is also helping to keep it from blowing out the end. Because that stuff, it locks in pretty solid. I mean, you go scratching that, yeah, you can scratch it with your fingernail, but it's in pretty solid. Now, one thing I would suggest is do not put the 39 mix on top. If you're going to, don't do it at all. If you're going to come at this thing with a hammer or a mallet or whatever, don't do it. It's nitrates, it's aluminum, it's magnesium, you got oxidizes, metals in there. Do not do it. You'll probably get away with it and stuff like that, but I'll tell you something, you can get that 39 mix to go if you don't treat it right. Don't do it with a mallet. I've never had any problems pressing this, but it's under a controlled environment. I got a shield in front of me. Don't hit on oxidizes and metals. Don't do it, guys. I'm telling you, you're going to be cruising for a bruising. Excuse, please? Yeah. Do I pound on it? You can do anything you want. I press everything, including my whistles, obviously, spillets. Anything I do that requires compressing stuff, I do it pneumatically. I don't hit on anything. I just don't do it. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm not saying the trade doesn't do it. I just don't do it.
Can you talk a little about the safety around your press? I mean, is there anything special? You wear gloves, you have black shield, you mentioned. Yeah.
Well, I primarily have the shield. I've modified the drill press. It works out really well. Mounted an air cylinder on top of a drill press. You've got the ability to use the quill of the drill press. You can use that free of the air cylinder so that on certain things, if they're a little rickety or whatever, I'm not saying this, but if it just doesn't feel right, you can bring things down and you can seat them before you put the pressure on it. It really works out nice. You've got the gauge on the side of the drill press that normally would tell you how deep you're drilling and stuff like that. You can get to see where your comp levels are coming up. It really works out nice. The primary reason I have the shield in front is to tie the whole thing together so that I'm putting the pressure on it. I'm not springing the table and the head of the drill press like this. The shield ties everything together. But when I'm doing my whistles and stuff like that, I'm working on the other side of that. I got a Lexan window and I got some 1/8" steel plate in front of me. I just I've never had problems. But if I ever do have problems, I want to minimize my problem to me. Now, I've heard whistle stories about people getting killed making whistles and stuff like that, so you really want to be careful doing that stuff. That's 1/4 inch. But the wind, you know, the stuff's down here and the wind is up here, just so I can see what's going on. On my rockets and stuff like that, because it's quicker to work with, I do stand on the side of it because I'm just working right here and stuff. I got my air valve over here. But when I'm doing whistles and stuff like that, no way, Jose, because I also sleeve the whistles. And I don't want shrapnel going in, hurting me, because it's difficult to explain how it happened. Now, as far as, you know, I charge the things up. Put my false muzzle on here to put the last few pressings of clay and stuff like that. This forms a little indentation in the end of the clay. And then when I'm done pressing up all my rocket motors, I press a little bit more comp than what I need. I do not allow this to come and pierce through and regulate my delay or anything like that. I press more comp than what I need, and then when I'm all done and stuff like that, I go over to my drill press on slow speed with a nice sharp carbide drill, making sure you don't keep drilling and plugging the flutes up of the drill of comp and stuff like that and generating heat. But I take a carbide drill that stays nice and sharp, and I take my motors and I just drill them back. It's more or less like making a spillet. It's basically what you're doing, because here's your delay from this burning column in here that gives you delay till when you ignite the heading. Set my quill stop on the drill press. And I drill them all back to about 600 thousandths. Works good. I've used 600 thousandths with the 39 mix for a delay, and I've used it with the black powder mix for a delay, and it seems to work very well. I have heard the old rule of thumb is you put one diameter above this. So 3/4 of an inch, it's another 150 thousandths over the 750, 3/4 of an inch. I'm running 600 thousandths. It'll still work, it's just that the rocket tends to arc over a little bit more, and if that's what you want, that's all under your control. You change this to what you want. I found that 6/10 of an inch works pretty good. Again, nothing's cast in stone. It's just any rocket you're going to be seeing me shoot this weekend, 6/10 of an inch delay. And that's how I get my delays. I drill back, just like if you were making a split for a multi-break shell or something like that. You charge a little bit more powder than what you want, and the way I do it is drill them back so I've got exact distances so I get my timing as close as possible. Ring shell heading, maybe on Monday some of you guys saw a ring shell rocket go off. That was right here. In this case I use plastic hemispheres. Trick on a ring shell is you want to get small stars, but you want to make sure that they're primed and they light well, because if you're missing a couple of stars, you'll see it in the ring. Another key is dialing in your brake charge. And on this, I pump out some little 5/16 pellets. One at a time. I have a little pump I use in my hand. Just I sit there. Over the course of an evening, I'll pump up a bowl of pellets. I have no star plates or anything like that. I'm not making thousands of them. I pump up some 5/16 pellets out of a red mix that uses Parlon and Magnalium. It's a nice mix. It's not as nice as my super red mix, but it's a water-bound mix you can use with water. It's a carbonate mix as opposed to a strontium nitrate mix. Pump them up, let them dry, and I have these little 5/16 pellets. They're not round, they're cylindrical. Put them in my little tumbler at home, and I prime them up with the black powder prime, and they come out kind of like a little, they're still oval, but they're rounded. Again, you make your I make my pass fire a little teeny bit different. I get the fire up to the equator. I do it with some black match and some plastic airline tubing, 1/4 inch OD, a little bit larger than 1/8 inch ID plastic tubing that fits into the end of the, you drill this out, it's in the other end. Get my fire up to the middle. 75, 15, 10 on rice hulls. You make a bed about up to the, almost up to the equator. Then you lay in your ring of stars. You take the other half, fill it with rice hulls. And when that's filled with rice hulls, this is now the top hemisphere, okay? I don't have one, but you can visualize what it would look like. I take a nice stretch saran wrap over it. So I can take the thing and I can flip it upside down. And the rice hulls don't come out. Nestle it over the thing so you can get the thing start to seat. Slit the saran wrap with a razor blade. Methylene chloride dissolves the styrene pretty good. Squeeze it together. Now right on top, so most of this ring shell is filled with 75, 15, 10 coated on rice hulls, but I also take and make a little teeny bag of flash powder. It's a 2 scoop measure of flash. Take some saran wrap, and poke it down into my finger. Put the 2 scoops in there, and you kind of like work it into a thing like a little teeny packet of flash powder. And I tie it off with a clove hitch. Cut the extra saran wrap. So I have this little teeny baggie of flash. I set that right smack on the top of the tube that brings the fire up to the center of the shell. Just that little package of flash sitting on there when I assemble the thing. So there's a little teeny flash in there that helps. I don't know if it really helps or not, but I just have always done it that way. And the ring seems to come out nice and they seem to light. And again, I don't have too many complaints about the ring shells. They work reasonably well. But that's it. There's no black magic. You just got to get stars that light. You got to get enough of them in there so that you don't have just a few in a ring. You want to get as many as you can. It's just Just a matter of doing it.
How about you? Will you use black match all the way up?
No, I don't use black match. Oh, you mean inside of here?
Inside the motor.
Yeah, I just taken, it's just regular old black match. I have run the black match with this formula. I've run the match all the way up to the top, and I've run it as, you know, just in a little bit. It seems to work relatively well.
Does the match raw once it goes past the
Yeah.
clay? You don't have the sleeve or
Well, yeah, the sleeve.
on the outside?
No, it's the paper around the outside of the match might be, it's not critical. Might be into this area here, and you have a little bit at the end of the, you just want to throw flame up inside, that's all. But you do want to tie it off, because if you just put the match over there and you nose this with the gum tape, and when you let it dry and everything, you can pull out the match. So you do want to tie it off, so that when you go pull the cap, the match doesn't come with it. You can use anything you want, Visco fuse, I just use match. It lights easy, you see it going, it gives you plenty of time to walk away. And same thing you do on shells, so it works well on the rockets. Any other questions?
How much pressure are you using in the pressing?
I got a 3 3/4 inch piston mounted on top, and I'm putting about 120 pounds of air. I figured it out, it comes to about 1,100 to 1,300 pounds, in that range. I have done rockets with less than that when I had a smaller cylinder up top, and they have worked. But I was in the mood to make a larger cylinder, and I made a larger one, and I crank it up to 120 pounds, and it works. Now, in answer to your question before, how do you get the sleeve out? Or how do you get the engine out of the sleeve? I made up another deal here. There's a little shelf inside of there that just catches on the edge of this tubing. Slides in like so. You can see that will fit into the end of the tube. Okay? Put it down on the floor, and once you give it a few wraps with the mallet, you can feel it goes. It's not like you got a belt on it. You give it some good, firm, straight-on blows with the mallet, so that you're not in no side force on it. Straight down blows, and it starts to go. And once she slides down a little bit, tap, 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 and it comes out. The next thing is how you get it off the spindle. And my spindle is here. I have a vise. Go over to the vise, clamp this in the vise, put a strap wrench on it. Sometimes you can pull this off, depending. Sometimes you can pull this off. Sometimes you got to pound it out. But it sticks to the spindle pretty well. And every once in a while, you take some silicone spray on a rag, something like that. And some people use PAM. I have silicone spray or whatever, and you do your spindle. It helps. Other times you forget about doing it, or you don't do it that often, and they lock on a little bit tighter. But I clamp this in my vise over there. I have a strap wrench, and all you have to do is you get it and you pull on the strap wrench, and once it cracks, it breaks. And it's just a matter of comes right off. Any other questions? Yes.
Just out of curiosity, as far as the winch resistance and drag, you said that some on your payload you don't have a top cone.
Yes.
Does that make a difference? Have you ever seen that?
Nope. The reason this has a cone on it is because this is one that contains, there's 22 small whistles inside here. I shot a few of these on, nothing last night, I shot a few of these on Monday night. And again, it's basically a can made the way I described it before, pleating the end and stuff like that over. And I got my thermalite pacifier coming up through the center of the thing. Little small whistles, 5/16 ID whistles. They're about this long. Whistle with reports on it. They fit in here. You get about 22 of those in here. Then there's another disc that goes down on top of it. That disc is just hot melted. Here you get the hot melt, forming a nice fillet. And you could shoot it like that. It just looks flat on the end and doesn't look very presentable. And a lot of the conventions or fireworks festivals is show and tell. So in this instance here, I make up some cones But does it add to the aerodynamics at all? Not in the least. Not in the least. I mean, that's not aerodynamic. That's certainly not aerodynamic. But you take them out and light them, they work. A lot less than I used to. When I used to compete for Grandmasters and stuff like that, a lot of time. Now it's, you know, you get all psyched up at work, right? What are you going to do when you get all kinds of ideas and stuff like that, and you come home, you have supper or whatever it is, and you sit down, the cat jumps on your lap, and you're watching I watch a lot of financial stuff on TV, you're watching to see what happened that day. No, the cat won't let me up. She just won't let me out of that chair. So you're petting the cat, and next thing you know, your ambition to run down and do some work or whatever, that kind of subsides a little bit. But I don't put the time into this stuff that I used to do. It's just, and I'm glad, because I have other things. You know, my model airplanes take up a lot of time. I'm working my overtime whenever they offer it to me because I want the money. And that's basically why I don't put in as much time. Why you didn't see a whole bunch of shells for competition last night. Because I like to build 8-inch multis and stuff, but boy, they take a lot of time to put together. And they also take a lot of chemicals and stuff like that. And I'm using up a lot of what I have had in the past, and I'm glad to see the inventory going down, to be honest with you. You can have a lot of fun with rockets. I mean, no, it's not an 8-inch multi-break shell, but you can make up, you don't have to have a whole pounds and pounds of each color star and everything like that. You can cut nice little Parlon stars for you, make them nice and small. They burn a reasonably long time, and they're nice colors and stuff like that. You can have yourself a ball doing stuff in this. Yes?
How are you finding sticks to your rocket motors or the glue? I know you're tied to the
Yeah, I just use some hot melt and stuff like that just to hold the stick on, but hot melt's only to the surface. So, I mean, you know, you're pulling things out of the coffin over there or whatever, or you're passing stuff out for people to light, and you're only glued on the surface. So I just take and do a clove hitch or some string around the thing. And then just to make sure the clove hitch don't come loose, just a little drop of super glue on it. That way I don't have to worry about, hey, the last thing you want is, it's bad enough if a stick breaks off the motor, but if something went wrong when it was being fired or something like that, you don't want to, you know, you want the thing to go where you're pointing it. You don't want it to go off crazy or nothing like that. So it's just a little extra insurance. It looks a little bit more professional in my eyes. It looks better. Yeah, it takes a little bit longer to do, but.
Do you get discounts on super glue?
Well, when you know the guys, when you build in airplanes a lot and stuff like that, and I race, which means I go through a lot of airplanes, because racing you have a lot of mid-airs and your equipment doesn't last that long. You buy super glue 2 ounces at a time, and or a bunch. You just buy stuff in bulk. I would suggest that if you do start experimenting, that you invest in a good scale. I would also suggest that without hesitation, you get yourself one, if not two, of the water-based fire extinguishers, the ones that you used to see in school or whatever the heck. You charge them up with air and water. I would highly suggest that everybody here has at least one or two of those. That should be really the first thing you should invest in if you're going to experiment with this stuff, is some good fire extinguishers. I can't tell you about the chemical ones and how they put out a fire that's supplying its own oxygen and stuff like that. I just know that the water ones that you can recharge, you should have at least one or two of those. It should be your first investment. If you can't get them secondhand, you should buy them and hope you never have to use them. If you ever did have to use them, it will be the best investment you have ever had. I can't stress that enough. That should be number one.